Yes, thank you so much for agreeing to speak to me. I'm an employability advisor and I'm doing a talk with fine art final year students to increase their employability, because as you know, it's really difficult course to kind of get a secure future sorted out. So could you start by telling us about your education journey?
Yeah, it's been quite a higgledy-piggledy one actually. That when I was at school, like I was very studious, very hardworking, but the way that I was trying to see things was in a linear way, which I think was potentially quite detrimental at that stage. Because basically what I did, I saw my four older sisters and I thought, okay, well, this sister's doing studying medicine to become a doctor. This sister's studying physiotherapy to become a physiotherapist. And I thought, I'll study architecture and become an architect. So I was just thinking about the career that I'd go on to rather than the subject that I'd really enjoy. So I went to study architecture at UCL, the Bartlett. Yeah. So for A level I did fine art, graphics, and psychology, and really enjoyed those. But architecture was a very different story. And in fact, I think it became very clear to both myself and the tutors that I wasn't in the right place. Where, for example, for our building project, I was designing this Stilton cheese farm for a farm and a cat living together on top of a prostitute's graveyard in Southwark. And the prostitute's graveyard is still there because they weren't allowed to be buried by the church during that time. So I designed this Stilton cheese farm, which is built almost like a rickety wooden roller coaster clinging to the side of a wall. And like the farmer, like he had his own fireman's pole going to the basement to make the cheese, and I learned how to milk a cow, and I learned how to make Stilton cheese.
Yeah.
And I even put a picture of me milking a cow on the front of the portfolio. And I remember the tutors called me into their office, and they said that they didn't think that I was thinking like an architect, and I completely agreed, because all my interest and energy was invested into the idea, rather than the building itself.
Yeah.
And they said that they could imagine me having a lot more fun in something like fine art, where my ideas have got free scope to run.
Sure, it's more of a kind of direct link to changing the world. I mean, architecture does change the world, but I suppose there's more of a easy access to being a changer of things through fine art.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's a really important point. And in particular, how it was often said in our architecture course of encouraging us to look at art exhibitions in the hope of inspiring the work. And then so after then I did art foundation at Chelsea College.
Oh right, okay.
And I went from having one of the worst years of my life, like on the architecture, to having one of the best years of my life, where it felt almost like going back to play school again. And I felt like a kid in a sweet shop, like working with all these different ideas, and had a great time, very experimental. And it was just so refreshing to have no right or wrong answers. So I stayed at Chelsea College for my BA degree after then.
Oh, okay.
And that was within fine art, where it wasn't compartmentalised into photography or painting or sculpture or performance.
Oh, okay. So the degree was very broad-based and you weren't kind of slotted into a particular discipline.
That's right, yeah, and I loved that. So we'd have crit groups with people who worked with all sorts of different mediums, but it was just about developing the ideas, regardless of how you realised them.
Yeah, so what year was that you started your degree?
I started in 2005.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I'm kind of a little bit behind with what's happening in the art world, even from 2005. So would you say that ties in with the way art was happening in terms of disciplines as well? Was that kind of a zeitgeist for what was happening out there?
Actually, I think, yeah, perhaps, but I think that with the sort of works that people would make, they did seem to specialise within just one medium.
Okay.
Even though they had free rein.
That's interesting, yeah.
It's quite common for people to just really sort of find their own way of making.
Yeah. Okay.
But for myself, I just loved working with different mediums, like with fabric, with film photography, and with objects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just loved how, being multidisciplinary, I could see my ideas from like different places and like sort of look back at it and surprise myself and challenge myself. Yeah. But yeah, after Chelsea College, it was quite a wilderness. Like it was very difficult to get a job. And I ended up moving back to my parents after graduating. Yeah, and when people keep asking, like, oh, do you know what you're going to do? Do you know what you're doing? And I'm like, oh, well, it's so tricky. And I think it really came to a head with these questions that would be asked when like, if my mum would say, oh, like, do you know what you're doing yet? And I'd be like, oh, but I really want to focus on my artwork.
Yeah.
And oh, but that's a hobby. Like, you need to think of like a. And I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't know what to do, and I kept applying to places, but kept getting no's.
So, what kind of jobs were you applying for?
There was it's quite a while ago now. But something that I did enjoy doing was teaching.
Okay.
So I started doing volunteering work for adults with learning difficulties, and I was teaching them weaving and ceramics and glass and sometimes painting, and I really enjoyed that. Found it very rewarding and energy giving. If I were in an office in a 9-to-5 job, I'd find it so like oppressive. But then I also got paid work as a kitchen porter, washing dishes in the local restaurant. It was for minimum wage.
Yeah.
And one of the things that appealed to me about that job is that I thought, like, I can just. It sounds quite antisocial, but I love the thought of just being my own little world there.
Yeah.
And that I could be there with my thoughts, and I found it quite therapeutic, that I could just sort of develop ideas in my head whilst going on autopilot, washing the dishes. And it did dawn on me. I thought, my goodness, I worked so hard at university, got a first, and then here I was, like, in a minimum wage job. And I think, my goodness, like, after all of that, and because with the final year was so intensive, that finishing it was like, oh my goodness, what now?
Yeah.
So it was quite a contrast between the intensity and the nothingness that followed.
I mean, looking back, do you feel that nothingness was fundamental to kind of, you spoke about starting foundation and it being, a liberation, and then your degree, and that was intensive. Do you feel that the kind of more mundane stuff that you had to do was kind of fundamental to making you the artist you are now? Like, do you feel if you would have missed out on that experience, that would have been a bad thing?
I think that's a really good point, because despite all of that, I still had fire in my belly, and I still really wanted to make the work, and I still continued making the work. That I'd have that really like fast-paced, like physically demanding work, and then I'd go home and I'd create new work. But the work that I'd do at home, I'd find energising. So it was almost like I sometimes refer to the artwork as, or as play rather than work, because it feels, very energising, very good. And so I still made the work alongside paid work and the volunteering. And it's almost like a self-psychoanalysis. Beyond being an interest, it's an interest in my interest. So it's something that really helps me. And another way that I've referred to it before is that it feels like my childhood relationship with my invisible friend, where it's almost like a relationship with my own intuition, where I make something that feels right, and I look back at it and try and give it a voice, give it words. It's like a relationship between my thought and intuition. But
that's a very, it's the way an artist, it's the way of the artist, isn't it? Could I ask you a little bit about kind of, after you graduated and then you had this kind of mundane work, like a lot of people do, fine art graduates do, how did that start kind of, how did the transition into professional artist begin? So in terms of funding or networking, how did that start to happen for you, Jonny?
Well, it was during that low point that I really realised, it sort of really cleared the fog on what it was that I wanted, what it was that I wanted to do. And so I decided to apply for a master's at the Royal College of Art in photography, and was delighted to get a place, despite having quite a bizarre interview. It was this bizarre situation where the head of photography, he asked me a question and I didn't hear what he said, so I asked him to repeat it, and then he repeated it again, but because I kept saying to myself, well, listen to the question, I missed it a second time. So I said to him, oh, I'm really sorry, could you perhaps rephrase it? So he asked it a third time, and again I missed it. So I could only remember one or two words that he'd said in the sentence, so I just made up a really general answer that was like... And I think again those nerves were a sign of how much I cared about this and how much I wanted to do it. So I saw them all as signposts, really, to guide me into the right place. And I had a brilliant time at Royal College. It was still quite challenging in terms of finances, where I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but I was doing clinical sleep trials alongside my studies to help fund it. And I was also doing care work, caring for people with lower functioning autism. And then I was also working in 2 different bars and pubs. So it was very intensive. So every day I was just running place to place, and it was quite a juggling act. But making it, because I sometimes see it as like a positive addiction. Where even if money didn't exist, I'd still be making the work that I do. And even if the work that I make were to drain my money and I'd have to have a job to support it, I'd still be making it, I'd still be doing it, because it's something that I just have to do. And I think as well, even if no one else were interested in it, I get so much from it personally that I'd still do it as a thought process and as a rewarding pathway. Thanks.
So
it's after Royal College actually, that because they were fantastic in developing my ideas, that pushed and challenged me, and my work just developed so much across that 2 years, but also because of the facilities that they had there, so that I could experiment with different mediums like 3D scanning and printing, with fine casting and with weaving machines, and it was just fantastic. And upon graduating, I applied to one of these graduate awards called New Sensations. And was lucky enough to become a finalist for it. So they gave funding to create a new piece of work for each of the 4 finalists for an exhibition in October. at Victoria House in London.
So the funding was released to you after you graduated after your postgrad, and then you were kind of exhibiting by the autumn after you graduate, after your MA.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was with it was in association with Solent Gallery and Channel 4. So they also made a short documentary for Channel 4. And then was delighted to end up winning the prize.
Wow, amazing. That's fantastic.
And from that, Charles Saatchi bought the works from the exhibition.
I bet your mum didn't see it as a hobby then.
Oh, really?
I bet your mum didn't call it a hobby then.
Oh, yeah, I know.
By the way, Charles Saatchi's just bought all the fine work.
It's so funny, yeah. And now she's like, oh, why don't you think about getting a hobby, because you're
you work too hard.
It's completely swapped round, yeah. But yeah, and then he offered me a show at the Saatchi Gallery itself on King's Road.
Whoa.
And in fact, before winning the prize, I was offered other opportunities. So a solo show in Paris, and then a solo show at Fama Gallery in Italy.
So things were snowballing for you, really. How did those European opportunities come to you? Was it something you applied for, or had they visited the MA show?
Yeah, there was a curator of a museum in Italy, Filippo, and he came to give tutorials at the Royal College of Art, and he connected with my work there. So he wanted to keep following. He gave me his contact details. So then I kept him updated with how the ideas developed. And then he recommended my work to this gallery in Italy. And it's with artists that I really liked as well, like Matt Collishaw and Tony Osler and Mark Quinn, like with some of his work that I remember seeing when I was a teenager that I connected with. And so I felt very, very excited about that. And then they really helped in terms of press and then further opportunities.
So have you had to apply for any kind of Arts Council funding? Have you ever gone that route?
Yeah, it's funny, I've just put in an application for Arts Council funding to help me with the new residency that I'm doing later in the year with Camden Arts Centre.
Okay.
But I'm waiting to hear back. But yeah, it's quite a gruelling process.
It's not a process. Well, you tell me. Do you feel I'll kind of get onto another question I was going to ask you, which was, has your life as an artist been compromised in any way by the way in which funding opportunities work, and or does it help? You're being an artist, a creative thinker. Does it make you kind of go at things from a different angle?
Yeah, I think what often happens with artists is, again, it's that thing of, instead of thinking in a linear way, our minds can often think like a spider diagram, sort of darting off in different directions and linking abstract thoughts together. Yeah. It's a wonderful state to be in.
Yeah.
At the same time, it can be hard to think in a linear way, such as in writing an essay or filling out a funding application. But then it's also up to you as an artist to, potentially ask people who are better at thinking along those lines to help you with the application. And so what helped me was to ask different friends who'd also applied for funding and had successful results to look through my application and help me to reshape it.
Do you use an accountant, or do you tend to do your own tax returns?
Yeah. Started off doing my own returns, but it was so confusing. So and I'd get this state of panic where I think, oh my goodness, I'm going to be thrown into prison. Like, even though I hadn't done it before, I just had this fear that I'd make a mistake, that would end up framing myself by mistake. But yeah, I think it helps to have an accountant, because then they can they can sort of help your money to work for you in the best way possible.
Finally, is there anything that you feel you would like to share with final year fine art students of Southampton Solent University who are coming towards the end of the course, the big run up to the degree show now, and then into the graduate labour market? Is there anything you would like to share?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing to do is to make the work that you as an individual find interesting. Don't worry about what you think other people find interesting. It's about what you find interesting that counts. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make a piece of work that's very different, that's very original, and that's very you, that you can talk about and that you can find deeply rewarding. Because if you make work that you think that other people will find interesting, it will always be secondary. You'll always be sort of living your working life through other people's eyes. But it's when you make your artistic practice through your own eyes that the really interesting stuff starts to happen. So that's what I'd recommend, to just follow your own interests and see where they take you, and to be as honest with yourself as possible in that process. But also, I wanted to mention about networking, because something that I thought would be quite important to mention is that, like, at private views, I often find it quite excruciating, and I often feel a bit like an imposter, even if it's my own work being displayed.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of our students might think, oh, Jonny's doing so much, he must have brilliant networks, he must be so confident.
No.
Yeah, so that's good. So how do you deal with that? How do you...
Well, yeah, I think because I'm naturally quite introverted and I like my cave, I just like to be, like, I sometimes describe my artwork as my bubble, that I like to be in my bubble and just make my work and have conversations with the work, if you like. But at private views, like, I'm not really one to sort of go up to a stranger or speak to them, and I'm not really one to schmooze, because I find it quite draining, quite difficult, and especially things like small talk. I find, that I prefer to have to socialise in smaller groups of 1 and 3, where we can really dig deep with each other's ideas. But the opportunities that I seem to have had have been from constantly applying to open calls.
Okay.
And opportunities, such as on Arts Quest.
Arts Quest, that's a good tip off, yeah.
And in fact, it's one of these things where, like, I'll apply to 15 or so opportunities, and I'll get 14 no's, and then 1 yes. And then again, I will apply to another 15 opportunities, and I'll get 14 no's, and then 1 yes. And then I've noticed that people will often say, oh, you're so lucky.
Yes. No, you're not. You work really hard and you optimise every opportunity available to you. And I think that's a really strong message, actually. I think
it's so important that in the face of all these no's, of just keeping on going and keeping on applying, regardless, because statistically there are going to be far more no's than there will be yeses. But then the more that it's done, the more that it can help spark off this domino effect. But don't, I'd recommend not to worry about networking. Like, before this Skype conversation, I had a look through my exhibitions list, and I can't name one of them that was through schmoozing or through a friend.
I think that's really interesting, because you do look at your exhibitions list and you think, wow, he must be really well connected. You know, I bet he has dinner with Charles Saatchi from time to time, and he knows everybody.
I've never.
Well, there you go. Well, there you go. So, you know, you've just really worked hard to find the opportunities, applied for everything, and been successful in a few, which have snowballed. I mean, I think that inside knowledge from you, Jonny, is really valuable to our students.
And I think as well, it's better for it being that way, because because then you know it's about the ideas.
Yeah.
That other people outside of your bubble are interested in it because of the ideas, not because of your personality.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful, and I think that's the way that it should be.
Yeah.
That often people go into the art world for a love of ideas.